To another episode of the Mark Medley Show. So glad to be with you again, even though this is going to be what I know a sensitive episode because it's having to do with race. As a matter of fact, it took me a little bit of time to actually put my thoughts together to record this particular episode. I've been wanting to record this now for a couple of days, but I really wanted to give it some thought because I didn't want to be rambling. And I already know there are some scoffers out there who are going to be listening to this, who are already going to, first off, be defensive. And then secondly, they're going to resort to name calling or saying, black folks, you whine too much, slavery is over. But today's episode comes from what I've seen over the past couple of weeks, folks making comparisons of the COVID-19 or the coronavirus health precautions, the social distancing, the staying in the house. They're comparing that to slavery. And they're comparing the stay-at-home protesters to the civil rights movement, and neither one of them are anywhere close, thereby causing me to record this particular episode, which is titled, Why We Cannot and Must Not Compare the COVID-19 Health Precautions to Slavery, and Why We Cannot and Must Not Compare the Stay-at-Home Protests to the civil rights movement. Now, as I said, I honestly struggled in terms of putting my thoughts together for this, because like I said, I know there are folks out there who are going to be saying, oh, here they go, they're just too sensitive and they're whining again. But no, it's not about just a matter of whining. As a proud African American man, as a proud black man who knows his history, it is an affront. It is offensive and totally disrespectful to compare health precautions that were designed to save lives to slavery, where people were beaten and whipped and raped. Staying at home in the comforts of your home is nowhere close to being beaten and raped and whipped. And yes, we do have the right to protest. That is not coming to question here, and that is not the argument here. But the protesting of the health precautions is nowhere near the protests of a Rosa Parks, who was protesting along with everyone else in the civil rights movement for people to be treated as human beings. Folks were being treated less than human beings simply because of the color of their skin. So what I'm getting from these comments is a total, one, possibly lack of understanding or lack of knowledge or lack of caring of history. So when I hear commentary comparing something like the health precautions to slavery, that sends up a whole lot of red flags for me in terms of there's a lot of folks out there, one, who either don't know their history, don't understand their history, or just don't give a damn about history. Now, it could be a combination of all three, or it could be one or the other, but that's what that tells me. I just counted up, and I'm using the calendar from about March 16th because that's from where I am, where at that point the shelter in place was put in place was around March 16th, which means that we're about 47 days that we've been for lack of a better term, locked in our houses. 47 days, and those 47 days are being compared to slavery. What folks need to understand is slavery occurred over 400 plus years of time. But the time that we've been at home right now for about 47 or so days is about the same time of the Middle Passage. If you understood anything about the Middle Passage, that's when the slaves were being transported from Africa to the various islands and to the United States. They were locked in the hull of a ship, shackled and chained, lying side by side, defecating, urinating, menstruating. All of that was done as they lay there in the bottom of that ship. Those that couldn't make it and passed away were thrown overboard, and some of those that may have tried to rebel were chained and thrown overboard alive as well. So the fact that we can sit here and be talking about comparing staying in our homes, or not being able to get a haircut, or not being able to get our nails done, or work out at the gym, or get a massage, that we're comparing that to slavery, I take that as an affront. Yes, I do. I take that as an offense. As a matter of fact, if you're wondering, well, where is he getting this from? I tell you what, go take a look on the internet and Google some of this commentary. One was Fox News's Tomi Lahren compares social distancing to slavery. Another is Trump supporter claims prolonged lockdown is slavery at California anti-lockdown protests. They were carrying signs that read, quote, prolonged lockdown is slavery, unquote. And then whenever I move into the second part of this episode, we'll talk a little bit about the comparison to the civil rights movement. We had Houston City Councilman Michael Kibosh comparing the protests to Rosa Parks. We had White House economic advisor Stephen Moore calls pro-Trump coronavirus protesters modern-day Rosa Parks. Where are these folks getting that idea or their notion from? Because as I said, for me, that tells me there's a lack of understanding, but more likely it's a lack of caring. It's a lack of, as usual, respect for the experiences of people of color, for the experiences of the African American, for the experiences of black people. That's what that's saying. Once again, the experiences of black people are being downplayed, are being minimized. So the fact that you could take something that, yes, is an inconvenience, the fact that you can take something that, no, is not the most comfortable, and try to equate that to the experiences of folks being killed, of their families being separated, of mothers and fathers being torn apart, children being sent to other places, women being raped by the slave masters. The fact that you can equate us sitting in the comforts of our home and just not being able to go anywhere to that is unfathomable. And I get it. I understand in terms of the economics. I understand in terms of businesses losing money. I understand all of that. Matter of fact, my bachelor's degree is in business administration. I am very well aware of how businesses operate, the economics, finances. I understand unemployment. I understand it cannot be the best feeling to not be able to go to work or to receive your salary. I get that. But to compare this inconvenience that was designed to save lives to lives that were being taken by no fault of their own, lives that were being taken by no control of their own, is unfathomable. There is no way in the world this experience compares to slavery. There is no way in the world the protests for the stay-at-home edict, if you will, is in comparison to the civil rights movement. It's just a matter of disrespect, and we see that on a constant basis. This is not necessarily related to this, but yet in some ways it is. Because something came out about our press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, or McEnany, however she says it, where a few years ago she had tweeted something along the lines of, quote, Obama filling out his presidential bracket now on ESPN. Don't you have better things to do, son? like, oh, I don't know, govern. And then see that what makes this, there's a couple of things that makes that disrespectful. The fact that this young girl could be talking to the president, who's an African American, calling him son. You see, son, that's a buzzword. As African Americans, we're always addressed as boy. See, that's once again the showing of the disrespect. I had the same thing happen to me based on one of my tweets that I put out showing my displeasure around this situation. Someone tweeted back to me, grow up, sport. See, sport is the same as son, the same as boy. It's just the constant disrespect. So the fact that you can compare this inconvenience to slavery, that's disrespectful to African Americans. But I know for many of you, that doesn't bother you. You don't care. That's what you meant to do. The fact that you can compare a protest where you have folks with guns storming state houses, carrying Confederate flags, carrying on, having kids dance in blackface, the fact that you can compare that to the civil rights movement shows me that you don't care about your history. I get it, but at the same time, I have a right to show my displeasure, whether it be in my tweets, whether it be on my blog, whether it be in the podcast, whether it be in face-to-face conversations. I have the same right to share my displeasure as you do. Because again, the civil rights movement was about folks being treated just as human beings. As African Americans were not treated as human beings for the simple reason because of the color of their skin. And we're still being disrespected right now for the simple reason of the color of our skin. One thing I can truly say about our Jewish brothers and sisters, and I may be paraphrasing what their mantra is, but it's something along the lines of never again. They are clear. They will not suffer another Holocaust, and their children and children's children are taught from the womb to the tomb, never again. This will not happen to us again. And African Americans ought to be doing the same thing with their families and standing up when an atrocity, if you will, like this occurs. More African Americans ought to be yelling out as well in terms of this inconvenience being compared to slavery. Slavery was a 400 plus year experience of people being killed, lynched, fathers being taken out of the house and hung from the tallest trees. And we're comparing us not being able to go somewhere, for us not to go somewhere to be served. Because that's what some of these businesses is about. Restaurant is a business for us to be served. Hair salon is us getting served. Manicure is us getting served. I actually saw one of the protesters that had a sign up that said, I want a haircut. Well, cut your own hair. And you need to understand, because this virus is not a hoax. COVID-19 is not a hoax. The coronavirus is not a hoax. They have hairdressers in the mortician shop also. They have hairdressers in the funeral homes as well, that they style your hair so that when folks do their last viewing, they have an opportunity. You look good before they put you in the ground or cremate you or whatever. They have folks that give haircuts there too. So you need to understand, we're trying to keep you from winding up there. At some point, yes, we are going to be able to go back outside. At some point, yes, we are going to be able to go back to the nail salon. Yes, at some point, we are going to be able to go back to the barber shop and to the gym and to the massage parlor and to the bar and to every place else that we like to hang out. At some point, we are going to have an opportunity to do that. It's just not right now. And I can tell you right now, knowing my history, this is nowhere close. It's not even on the radar screen to slavery. Those protests out there was nowhere on the radar screen of the civil rights movement. So folks need to get some education. They need to understand history. They need to understand other folks' history. Folks need to understand more than just their history. And they need to understand life is more than just about them. That's why this whole hashtag about white privilege has been coming up. As I looked on Twitter on yesterday, white privilege was trending major league, big time. Because again, that's what, when you compare something like this inconvenience to slavery, that's what white privilege is all about. When you start talking about the protests that are happening now is the same thing as the civil rights movement, that's nothing but white privilege. That's why that hashtag was trending. And don't get me wrong, this is not an episode about me, your host, hating white folks, because I don't. It's not about me hating white people. But it is about the treatment, the way folks are treated, the way human beings are treated, the way human beings are disrespected. We have a president in the White House right now that makes it his business to overturn everything that was put in place by his predecessor. And the main reason for that was because his predecessor was an African American. He has made it his business. He is so focused on overturning everything that Barack Obama put in place, and the main reason for that overturning is because it was an African American man who put it in place. That's what we're talking about. That's why you get a hashtag white privilege. That's why you're getting that, and it's so popular. And black folks are not the only ones understanding this white privilege. There are some white folks who are understanding it as well. So as I come to a close in this particular episode, because this is one of my rougher ones, I wrote a blog post that was kind of sort of similar about a week or so ago, because normally my episodes and posts, they're happy, they're positive, but I can honestly say I was truly disturbed, irked, annoyed, angered by this constant comparison or this constant comparing of what we're going through at this moment to slavery. The Middle Passage alone was longer than what we are home at this moment. Even if we go for 2 months, that's still around the time of the Middle Passage. I know historically it says 3 weeks, but the Middle Passage was longer than 3 weeks. That's 21 days, and we're about double that now. The Middle Passage was more than 21 days. So we've been in our houses roughly about the time it took for the Middle Passage, but the difference is we can get up within our houses and go. We can go to our refrigerators, we can go to our stoves, we can go to our sinks, we can go to our home offices, we can go out in our backyards. Those folks who were on those slave ships, they were chained lying next to each other. It wasn't a matter of 6 feet apart, they weren't even 6 inches apart. Folks need to study and understand their history. I tell you what, I have a challenge for you if you've listened this far. Do some research on the Middle Passage. Do some research on how those slaves were taken from Africa and made their way to the various islands and then ultimately to the United States, and how many days that was. And maybe you'll get a clearer view or a better appreciation, or at least think about some of the words that you choose. I could almost see if this had been likened to being in jail. I could almost see if this experience had been likened to being in prison, because there are some similarities there between being locked up. But to compare this with slavery, to compare those loud, rowdy, rude protests to the civil rights movement, out of order, way out of line, nowhere in the ballpark. I'm going to cut it there. Hopefully you've gotten the message by now. And like I said, for those who are scoffers, you don't have to listen. You always have the option of turning off. You don't have to listen. That's one of the freedoms. So if you've listened this far, I thank you. If you turned off early and you haven't gotten here, then well, so be it. And I don't have a problem with nasty commentary. I don't. But if it gets too off the charts, I will block you. I ask you to continue to listen to the Mark Medley Show. As you can tell, I am passionate about this topic because, as I said earlier, as a proud black man, as a proud African American man who does know his history and who celebrates his ancestors, a proud black man who is not going to take that kind of guff from nobody, regardless of their age or their skin color. As a matter of fact, I'm almost sure that whoever tweeted to me, "Grow Up Sport," I don't think they were older than me, but they might have been. I don't know. Because I started to tweet back and then I said, you know what? I'm not going to argue with idiots. But I started to tweet back to that person, "Oh, I didn't know you were 10, 15, 20 years older than me to be calling me sport." Because see, that's what I guess maybe, I could take that from my 80-year-old uncle. I could take that from him, but I'm not going to take sport from someone who's younger than me, probably doesn't have the education I have, probably does not have the experiences I have. But yet again, that's the same thing Kaylee did with Obama by calling him son. And that's why this episode came about. So again, if you've been listening, I thank you. You can always find me on all the major podcast platforms. Would love to hear your feedback, whether it's positive or negative. But as I said, those of you that get really crazy negative, you will be blocked and deleted. Be safe out there. Follow those precautions as things begin to open up. Still be cautious. Don't be so quick to rush out there, because these deaths are not a hoax. Be safe. And again, I thank you so much for listening.